They tell you your first home is a milestone, a victory. And in some ways, it was. I was 24, no roommates, no parents, just me, a secondhand couch, and a lease with my name on it. After years of growing up in a noisy, overpacked house with 4 siblings and 1 bathroom, solitude was a dream I'd chased for years. Turns out it's a dream that gets quiet real fast. Too quiet. My little townhouse wasn't much. Beige siding, creaky floors, a tiny kitchen where the fridge door always drifted open unless you kicked it. But it had charm, especially the second-floor balcony. It wasn't big, just enough for 1 rickety chair and a rusted ashtray stand. But it became my escape. Every night, I'd go out there with a cigarette and let the silence wash over me like static. That's where I first saw her. The house behind mine had looked abandoned when I moved in. Weeds up to the knees, all the windows shut like eyes refusing to open. Every so often, a dim light would flicker on inside, but it never stayed long. Then one night, I saw her in the yard. She was standing by the dead garden beds, wearing a long gray nightgown that fluttered slightly in the breeze. Her hair was tangled and thin, nearly white, and her posture made her look like she was caught mid-thought, half-turned. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there. At first I thought she hadn't noticed me, but then her head slowly tilted up, and her eyes met mine, wide and wet. I nodded awkwardly, half raising my cigarette in greeting. She didn't move. I stayed inside after that. The next day I asked the mailman if anyone lived in the house behind mine. He shrugged and said something about an old lady named Dolores. Been there since before the development went up, he said. Don't think she has any family. I asked if she was okay. He just gave me a look. Old people get weird. That didn't make me feel any better. A few days passed without any sightings. I convinced myself she'd just been outside for a breath of air, or maybe even sleepwalking. I tried not to think about it. Then I saw her again, from the bathroom window this time. She was standing in another window of her house, second floor, peering out from behind yellowed lace curtains. Her head was barely visible, but her eyes, those eyes were locked on my window like they'd been waiting for it to open. This became a pattern. I'd catch glimpses of her in different windows, always at odd times, late afternoon, dawn. Once, at 3 a.m., when I got up for a glass of water, I looked out and saw her staring straight across the yard from a back bedroom, hands pressed against the glass. Sometimes the curtains would flutter just before I looked, as if she'd step back from them. It felt like a game. One I didn't want to play. I called my mom one night, trying to explain it. She's probably just lonely, she said. You know how older people get. They fixate. Don't let it creep you out. Just wave and be neighborly. I wanted to believe that. But then the sock appeared. It was early September, still hot enough that the AC wheezed just trying to keep up. I went out to mow the backyard and nearly tripped over it. A white tube sock, dirt smudged and stiff with age, lying in the middle of my fenced-in yard. The fence was locked. I checked it religiously. No gaps, no broken slats. I picked up the sock with the end of a rake and tossed it in the garbage, trying not to imagine how it had gotten there. The next day, it was a penny. The day after that, a child's plastic spoon. Each time, I threw them away. Each time, I locked the gate. I even installed a security latch. But still, they came. I stopped going out to the balcony. It didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like I was on display. Like, if I looked hard enough across the dark yard, I'd see her standing there with her eyes too wide, her mouth too still. Eventually, I stopped sleeping through the night. Every creak in the walls, every wind-blown thump felt like a sign that she was coming closer, that she wasn't content with watching anymore. And then came the doorbell. It was just after midnight. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard 3 quick, angry buzzes. I froze. The bell rang again, then again. I got up slowly, heart pounding, and looked through the peephole. It was her, Dolores. Hair wild, eyes wide and bulging like a frightened animal. Her face was pressed close to the door, her mouth working soundlessly. I couldn't open it. I backed away and grabbed my phone. Then she started screaming. "You took him! I know you took him!" Her voice tore through the night like a siren. She began pounding on the door with both fists. "Where is he? Where is he? Give me my boy!" I dropped the phone. My hands weren't working right. I don't remember deciding to open the door. I think I just wanted it to stop. But when I did, she came at me. She was faster than I expected. The knife gleamed once before she lunged. I stumbled back as it grazed my arm. I grabbed her wrist, shoved her into the wall. She hit the floor, but kept screaming, kept clawing. "He has him! He has him!" I kicked the knife away and held her down, my breath coming in gasps until I heard the sirens. The police had been called by another neighbor. Dolores was sedated, restrained, and taken away in an ambulance. One of the officers stayed to take my statement while the EMT bandaged my arm. He told me she'd been committed before, that she had a son, missing for over 30 years. Last seen in the house behind mine. No charges had ever been filed, no body ever found. The hospital declared her mentally unfit to live alone. She was moved to a state-run psychiatric facility an hour away. The house behind mine was locked up. For sale. I moved 3 months later. I couldn't stay. Couldn't sit on the couch without checking the door every 5 minutes. Couldn't brush my teeth without peeking behind the shower curtain. I'd walk into rooms with my fists clenched, sure I'd find her there. I never found out what happened to him, and I don't know what she thought I had to do with it. Maybe I looked like someone. Maybe it was the simple cruelty of madness. I didn't believe in signs, not omens, not premonitions, not the idea that a house could warn you. But now, looking back, I think the statues were trying to. We moved into the house the first week of October. My wife, Julia, and I had been searching for somewhere quieter, more spacious, something better suited to life with 3 kids under the age of 10. After 8 years of cramped city living, the suburbs promised space, calm, and something like peace. The house was old, but charming. 2 stories, wide windows, a creaky porch, and an overgrown garden in the back. The grass was wild, vines climbed the fence, and beneath a carpet of dead leaves stood 6 moss-covered statues. Some were human, others animal. All of them had the same weathered stone eyes and cracked, unmoving expressions. Julia found them quirky. The realtor laughed when I asked if they were valuable. "They've been here longer than the plumbing," she said. "Most buyers just mow around them." So we did. At first, everything was fine. Julia nested. The kids adjusted to their new rooms. I went back to remote work, grateful for the silence. For the first time in years, I felt like we had a future that didn't involve the walls closing in. And then the statues started to turn. It was subtle at first. I was sipping coffee one morning, looking out at the garden through the kitchen window, when I noticed the angel statue near the hedge had shifted. It had been facing the house. I was sure of it. But now it was turned slightly to the left, like it was looking away. Just a little. I chalked it up to memory. 2 days later, another one had turned, then a third. By the end of the week, every single statue had their backs to the house. "Are you sure you're not just imagining it?" Julia asked when I brought it up. "No," I said. "I've been watching them." "You what?" I started taking pictures. I showed her the photos on my phone, each one time-stamped. The changes were clear. She went quiet. "Maybe the kids moved them," she offered. "They're too heavy," I said. I tried moving one. I couldn't even lift it off the ground. We both looked out the window. The statues stood still in the midday light, their backs to us like we'd done something to offend them. We called the police after the 5th morning of waking to find the statues in new positions. It wasn't just the turning now. They'd moved closer, lined up, shoulder to shoulder, just a few feet from the house, as if they were preparing to breach it. A young officer came out. He took a walk around the yard, asked if we had any outdoor lighting. We didn't. Suggested we get cameras. We couldn't afford them. Not with a 3rd baby, not after the move. "There's not much we can do unless there's evidence someone's trespassing," he said. "Could be local kids messing with you." "If it's a prank," I said, "it's a damn elaborate one." He nodded, jotted something on his pad, and left. We never heard back. I told Julia we should move the statues back. She didn't like the idea. "They've been here forever. Maybe we just leave them alone." "I'm not superstitious," I said, "but I don't like them watching us." "They're not watching us," she said, but she wouldn't look me in the eyes when she said it. The next day I tried moving one of the statues again, braced my knees, got my arms around the stone base, and pushed. Nothing. When I turned around, our youngest was staring at me through the window. "It might as well have been bolted to the earth," I said. But things got worse. We woke up one morning and found "Leave Now" spray painted across the back wall of our house. The words were jagged, furious. The letters dripped like they'd been written in haste or rage. I called the police again. They came out, took a statement, said there had been some teenage vandalism around the area recently. Probably nothing targeted. Then why haven't any of our neighbors had issues? I asked. No answer. I installed motion-activated floodlights the next day. It was the best we could afford. That night, we kept the kids inside and locked every door and window. I carried a kitchen knife in my robe pocket, and for the first time since moving in, I felt like prey. A week passed, then 2. The floodlights didn't catch anything. The statues stayed put. We let our guard down. Then came the night of the dance. It was around 2 a.m. I was up feeding the baby while Julia slept. I walked past the back door, and something caught my eye. Movement. I peered out. 5 figures stood in the yard. They were wearing masks, cheap plastic ones, the kind you'd find in a Halloween bin at a thrift store. Blank faces, no expression. They weren't standing still. They were dancing. Grotesque, puppet-like movements, jerky arms, twisting torsos. Their limbs flailed like marionettes with tangled strings. No music or sound, just the rhythmic, chaotic spasms of bodies moving to something I couldn't hear. I froze. One of them suddenly stopped and pointed at the house. The others followed, then, as one, they charged. I grabbed the knife, yanked open the back door, and screamed, "Get out of here!" I ran toward them, swinging the blade. They scattered like leaves in the wind, darted through the garden, over the fence, gone. I stood in the cold, chest heaving, staring at the shadows beyond the hedges. My feet crunched on the fallen leaves. The statues were still there, silent witnesses. Julia ran out a few seconds later. "What happened?" "They were here," I gasped. "They were here, Julia." We filed another report. This time, the cops took us a little more seriously. But there were no footprints, no fingerprints, no leads. We borrowed money and finally bought a set of basic security cameras. For a while, nothing happened. No more messages or dancing. The statues stayed frozen at the edge of the yard, facing away from us. The footage captured nothing. Eventually, we tried to move on. We painted over the spray paint, let the kids back outside, started to pretend that it had all just been a bad patch, a nightmare in sunlight. But I couldn't stop watching the tapes. Every morning, I'd check, hoping and dreading that something would show up. Months passed. The statues grew mossy again. The garden returned to chaos. Our baby said his first word, "No." We laughed. But some nights, when the wind hits the house just right, I could swear I hear the sound of plastic feet tapping the ground, that awful offbeat rhythm. We still live here. We never found out who they were, or why they chose us. The neighbors never saw anything. The police eventually stopped calling back, but I know what I saw, and I still don't believe in omens. It wasn't the kind of house we ever imagined we'd end up in. Too big, too cheap, too remote. But when the listing popped up, 4 bedrooms, a garage, nearly an acre of land tucked into the base of a dusty hill in rural Arizona, it felt like a lifeline. After a rough few years, Tess and I needed a reset. I'm a journeyman electrician. She teaches pottery part-time. We weren't chasing dreams anymore. The peace didn't last. We moved in mid-July during one of those unbearable heat waves. The realtor said it had been on the market for a while, but didn't explain why. We chalked it up to location. It was 30 minutes to the nearest grocery store, and the neighbors were more cactus than people. Still, it was ours. We unpacked slowly, cooked our meals on the porch, and watched bats spiral into the dusk every evening. For a few weeks, we started to believe maybe we'd made the right choice, until the lights started flickering. At first, I thought it was the grid, old lines, rural setup, common out here. But it wasn't just flickers, it was patterns. Certain outlets would surge at the same time every night, around 3:13 a.m. The bathroom lights dimmed like they were running on half power, and the hallway light, it buzzed, constantly. A low, steady hum like a fly caught in a bottle. As an electrician, I couldn't ignore it, so I went to the basement. The basement itself was odd, more like a storage level carved out of rock than anything finished, dry, cold despite the Arizona sun. The previous owners had left some old furniture stacked down there, filing cabinets, tarps, dusty bookshelves. Nothing of value. But while I was tracing a line of faulty conduit behind one of the shelves, I noticed something strange. A wall that sounded hollow. I pulled the shelf aside, and there it was, a steel door, industrial grade. deadbolted, reinforced hinges, a rusted keypad, and the kind of lock you don't typically find in residential homes. I stood there a while, just staring at it. It was hidden purposefully. If I hadn't moved the shelf, I wouldn't have known it was there. When Tess came down later, I showed her. She laughed nervously, said maybe it was a storm shelter. Arizona isn't tornado country. We tried every key on the ring that the old owners left us. None fit. The keypad didn't respond to touch, probably disconnected or dead. So I called them. The husband picked up. Sounded surprised to hear from me. When I explained what I found, he went quiet for a few seconds, then chuckled awkwardly. "Oh yeah," he said, "that old door. Tornado room, never used it, lost the key years ago. Should have had it sealed off. You didn't think to mention it before we bought the house?" Didn't think it was relevant. He hung up after that. Tess didn't like how vague he was, neither did I. The surges in the wall outlets got worse. One night, the porch light turned itself on. We'd unscrewed the bulb 2 nights prior after it started strobing, and yet, there it was, flooding the desert in cold light. I needed to know what was behind that door. I found a locksmith out of Phoenix who didn't ask too many questions. The guy, Larry, showed up with a kit that looked more like a surgical bag than anything else. Took him about an hour, but eventually, with a loud clank, the door creaked open. The smell hit first. Stale sweat, mildew, something earthy and rotten. The room was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet. Bare concrete walls, no windows. But the contents? It wasn't a shelter. It was a shrine. There were symbols etched into the concrete. Circles with jagged lines, eyes without pupils, shapes I couldn't name. Black wax melted across the floor like old blood. A cot sat in the corner with rumpled sheets and an old torn blanket. A rusted wastebasket was filled with used tissues, food wrappers, and even an empty beer can. Someone had been living in here recently, but it was the chair that chilled me. It was an old wooden chair placed in the exact center of the room, facing the far wall. Larry said something like, "Hell no," and walked out. I didn't blame him, but I didn't move. I took another step in. My boots crunched on something. Pebbles? No, teeth. Tiny ones, like they'd come from a small animal, or something else. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw a second door. In the back of the room, half concealed behind a hanging cloth. It led to a narrow set of stairs, rough-hewn into the dirt, climbing up to a slatted wooden door. I followed it. It opened outside, into the side of a small rise behind the house. From the road, you'd never notice it. The cellar entrance was camouflaged by overgrowth and scrub brush, which meant someone could enter our home without us ever knowing. I sealed both doors before I told Tess everything. I didn't want her to panic, but panic came anyway. We called the sheriff. He looked around, nodded solemnly, and said it looked like a squatter situation. Promised to send someone to patrol the area. But when I asked if they could track down the previous owners again, he hesitated. They sold and left, no forwarding address in our system. We changed the locks. I wired the house with every floodlight and motion sensor I could afford. I even rerouted the electrical to bypass the flickering zones. It helped, for a while. But you can't outwire fear. 2 weeks later, it happened. We were asleep. Just after 2 a.m., something woke us. A deep pounding on the front door. Not knocking, slamming. I grabbed my flashlight and the old crowbar I kept by the bed. Tess called the police from the bathroom. By the time I got to the door, the pounding had stopped. I stood in the entryway, holding my breath. Then came the tink, the sound of rocks against glass. One hit the living room window, then another, then smash. The kitchen window shattered. Glass exploded inward. I charged out the back door, flashlight swinging. I caught a glimpse, someone sprinting across the yard, low to the ground. Masked? Maybe. It was too dark. By the time the sheriff arrived, they were long gone. He said he'd file a report. Probably just some local drifter. That's what they always say. We haven't heard back from the previous owners. Their phones are disconnected. Their names don't appear on any recent property or business records I can access. It's like they vanished. We've since boarded up the cellar entrance, poured concrete into the inside stairs, but I still check the basement every night. I've rewired every inch of this house. There's no logical reason for the flickers now. But some nights, the bathroom light still dims at exactly 3:13 a.m. Every time, I stand there in the hall and listen. Sometimes I hear breathing from behind the wall. Tess wants to sell, but no one's biting. Maybe the house remembers things. Maybe the land keeps things. People always say the desert is empty. They've never lived in it. They've never found out what happens when you buy someone else's escape route and realize, too late, that they never escaped at all. There's something about moving into your first real home with the person you love that feels cinematic, like the world is finally giving you permission to exhale. That's how it felt for Laura and me, newlyweds, just married 3 months, moving into a quiet little house tucked near the woods in a place called Red Hollow, Tennessee. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy 2-bedroom ranch with yellow siding and a swing on the front porch. But it backed right up to the forest, and when the wind moved through the trees just right, it sounded like waves crashing. We thought we were lucky, but we were wrong. The first few days were everything we hoped for. Morning coffee on the porch, dinner by candlelight. We painted the living room ourselves, got lost in the wrong grocery aisles together, argued over where to put the toaster, and laughed about it later in bed. It felt like we were building something solid. A beginning. Then the music started. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I was washing dishes and Laura was upstairs getting ready for bed. The windows over the sink were cracked open just a little. It was still warm out, and that's when I heard it. Old, warbly, like it was playing through a Victrola with a dying battery. A man's voice bouncing gently through the trees. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? The big bad wolf. I froze. It wasn't loud, just loud enough. Like it was coming from a distance, but the wind was carrying it. I turned off the water and leaned closer to the screen. It was definitely coming from outside, from the woods. Laura called from upstairs. "Did you turn something on?" "No," I called back. "Just hold on." I walked to the back door, cracked it open. And there it was, clear as anything, music from another time, spilling out from the darkness beyond our fence. Tra-la-la-la-la. The hair stood up on my arms. I stepped back in and shut the door. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe there were campers nearby. Maybe it was a passing car with its windows down. I told Laura not to worry. I didn't really believe it myself. But the next night, it happened again. Same time and place, but a different song. We were watching a movie when we heard it. Laura muted the TV and sat up slowly. This time, the tune was even older, slower, like something from an antique fair. "Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer, do..." It was unmistakable. We both stood, silently listening to the strange, warbling voice echoing from the forest. "I'm half crazy. All for the love of you." I grabbed the flashlight and told her to stay inside. The yard was empty. I followed the sound out toward the lawn. It was louder now, like it had moved closer since the night before. And that's when I saw an old battered radio sitting in the grass near the tree line, one of those boxy metal ones with cracked dials and peeling labels. The music was coming from it. I crouched down and picked it up carefully. It wasn't plugged in, obviously. No batteries I could see. Just a humming, glowing little speaker. Somehow alive. "Laura," I called. "Come look at this." But her scream cut me off. "Mark, behind you!" I turned and froze. There were 3 figures standing at the edge of the woods, perfectly spaced, evenly apart, unmoving. I couldn't see their faces, just silhouettes against the trees. One of them was slightly hunched. Another seemed taller than the others, but they all had that same awful, patient stillness. My legs reacted before my brain did. I dropped the radio and sprinted back to the house, my flashlight beam swinging wildly. I didn't look back until I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it twice. Laura was as white as a sheet. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, trying to steady my breath. "I don't know, but they were just standing there." We called the police. To their credit, they came fast. 2 officers. One stayed with us while the other combed the woods with a flashlight and a K9 unit. They asked questions we couldn't really answer. "Did you recognize them?" "No." "Did they say anything?" "No." "Could you describe their clothing?" "Just dark." They collected the radio, said they'd test it for prints. But the officers didn't find anyone. No footprints or tire tracks. No signs of camping or trespassing. Just the radio. And the music that had stopped playing the moment I dropped it. That night, Laura and I stayed curled on the couch together, flinching at every gust of wind against the siding. I kept waiting for the music to start again. It didn't. But that somehow felt worse. The police followed up a few days later, just to check in. No leads. The radio was old, really old, and had no modern circuitry inside, no battery pack. They couldn't figure out how it had been playing. Laura wanted to leave. I couldn't blame her, but I said we should wait it out, see if it was just some twisted prank. or maybe some local kids with a dark sense of humor. But deep down, I wasn't convinced. It didn't feel like a joke. We've looked into security systems, motion lights, even considered getting a dog. Laura's been sleeping with earplugs. I've been sleeping with a baseball bat beside the bed. We've only lived here for 2 weeks. It was supposed to be the start of something beautiful. Instead, we're terrified to turn off the lights. I still don't know who they were, or what they wanted, or if they'll come back. But every night, I check the yard from the upstairs window. And sometimes, I swear, I see something in the trees.